Truth is I'm tired, options are few. I'm trying to pray, but where are you? I'm altered, starved, hurt and abused. I can't fake what's left to do. Truth is I'm weak, no strength to fight, no tears to cry. Even if I try, but still my soul refuses to die. One touch would change my life, take me to the King. I don't have much to bring, my heart is torn in pieces, it's my offering. Lay me at the throne, leave me there alone, to gaze upon your glory and sing to you this song. Take me to the King. Truth is, it's time to stop playing these games. We need a word for the people. So Lord, speak right now. Let it fall like rain. Oh, yeah. We're desperate. We're searching after you. Oh, no rules, no religion. I made my decision to run to you, the healer that I need. Take me to the King. I don't have much to bring. My heart is torn in pieces. It's my offering. Lay me at the throne. Leave me there alone to gaze upon your glory and sing to you the song. Take me to, Lord, we make mistakes. We give your way. The glory not for us, it's all for you. Take me to the King. I don't have much to bring. My heart is torn in pieces. It's my offering. Leave me there. I want to gaze at your glory, Lord. I want to sing to you this song. Take me to the King. 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 It's good to see everybody. I tell you, and I mean this from my heart. I feel like David when he said, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. I tell you, this is a little bit of heaven. Every week we have an opportunity to get a little bit of heaven as we come into the presence of the Lord with the family of God. And we can worship together as we all go to the King together. I don't know, we might need to make some adjustments here. I'm going to pick up where you left off in your scripture reading. So I'm going to ask that you turn with me in your Bibles to the book of 2 Kings. Now, you all read from the 6th chapter all the way to the end, from verse 24 to the end of the 6th chapter. I'm going to pick it up because all of this is a part of the same story that we're going to look to today and deal with the topic of desperate measures. Desperate measures. 2 Kings, the 7th chapter, and I trust that you all have it at this time. And I'm going to begin to read in your hearing, starting at verse 1. I won't be to read the whole story, but I'm going to read to a certain point. And you pick up the rest of the story when you get home, because I think it's going to be a two-part sermon on this story. God wants to do some special things for this church, things that will blow our minds, things that are unbelievable. As we're going to see in this story. Now, you read the story so far. We're going to be, but God is the kind of God that does miraculous, unbelievable, unimaginable, unfathomable things, things that man could never do, things that defy our greatest imagination. Eye have not seen, ear have not heard, neither has entered into the mind of mankind. Imaginative as our minds are, as powerful as they are, we cannot imagine what God has in store for his people. The only one that can reveal it is the Spirit of God. Otherwise, it is total foolishness to us. And we want to talk about the first step, because the series is talking about steps to revival and reformation. And Jesus has been working with Bethel through the sermons that he's been giving me in dealing with just the first step in revival, because it takes this step, as we will see, hopefully begin to see today, that it takes this step to experience the great things, the unimaginable things, the off-the-chart things that God has in store for Bethel. So let's pick it up now. We read, I'm going to just kind of rehearse what you read. Israel is in a siege now because they have not been faithful to God, because they haven't believed in him, really. And we're going to deal with that a little more as we get into it. And the Lord has told them, when he blessed them, he told them that as long he had great plans for them, he said, I'm going to make you the greatest nation on the face of the earth. He said, but you're going to have to be faithful to me, because if you're not faithful to me, then you can't cooperate with me and you won't be prepared for what I'm going to do. Did you hear what I said? He says, if you're not faithful to me, you can't cooperate with me, because the things that I'm going to do are going to be unimaginable to the natural mind. And when I tell you, if you're not with me and not in my spirit, you won't believe it. It will be foolishness to you, because spiritual things are spiritually discerned. And to the natural mind, I don't care how great that mind is, the natural mind, because we are man, we are finite and God is infinite, the natural mind can't even conceive what I want to do. It will be foolishness to you, and you won't follow me. Because following me, and I'm going to kind of jump ahead and kind of unload a little bit right here, because following me, Jesus said, requires desperate measures. Desperate measures. And that's why we want to talk about the first step is required, comes from desperate measures. So they didn't believe God, and they began to serve other gods, and because they served those other gods, God told them, I want you to do this for your homework today. Read Leviticus, the 26th chapter. Leviticus, the 26th chapter. Now, Deuteronomy 28, the Lord gave the blessings and the cursings that were, the blessings that would happen if they were faithful, and the curses that would happen if they didn't. And that's, we read that too. But Leviticus really breaks it down and really brings it. Leviticus, the 26th chapter. Write that down and study it when you get home. From the 1st to the 14th chapter, the Lord tells them the rewards of being faithful to him, because he's going to do some wonderful things. He says, you're going to be the greatest nation on the earth. And when you come into battle, no other earth, no other nation will be able to conquer you. When you sow your seed, I'm going to bless your farming and all that. You'll be blessed in the fields, you'll be blessed on the battlefield, you'll be blessed at home, you'll be blessed in every kind of way. He said, but if you don't be faithful to me, then I'm going to give you a series, and read it. He says, a series of curses, and that doesn't mean God, but curses are going to happen, non-blessings. And he says, I'm going to do it in order to get your attention so you will become desperate. And said, and each one, he says, is going to be 7 times worse, meaning they're going to increase in their intensity because I have to get you more desperate in order for you to turn to me. Otherwise, if you're not desperate, you're going to keep on doing what you do. And so he said, the first one is, you're going to find out no other nation is going to be able to stand with you in war. Read it, in, like I say, in the 26th chapter, starting at the 14th verse, he starts getting into this. He said the first curse is going to be, at the first level, you're going to stop winning the battles. Your enemies are going to start defeating you. And you can make this, you can interpret this into 2013. You know, he says, those things, those plots against you shall not prosper. You know, how do you see things working in your life? But anyway, let the Holy Spirit use your imagination. Then he said, now if you don't hear it at that level, the next level is going to be your fields are going to turn to iron, and your crops are going to turn to brass. In other words, your work is not going to prosper. You're not going to be blessed in the fields, or you may, you know, even on your jobs or whatever. You may work and you may make a good little amount of money, but it won't be blessed. So now, if you don't hear me at that level, if that doesn't make you desperate, he said, then what's going to happen is that a plague or pestilence is going to come upon you. All right, and then the fourth one it was increasing, and I'm trying to remember it. I don't want to mess it up because you know I get it kind of time. But it's going to increase. The final one, the fifth and final call of God to get the people desperate was this: I'm going to send a nation from the north that's going to besiege you, and it's going to be so hard that you're going to begin to eat your children. And if that doesn't get you, then you're just going to be overrun as a nation. And they're going to put you into captivity for 70 years. But there was an intensity. Now what happened is this. Israel, as you read it, they had been turning and been so rebellious, their hearts were so hardened now that God had to come to the final one, because they, you know, the mother said, we made a pact, we're going to eat my child today. And the awesome thing about it is she actually gave up her child to be eaten and ate it. You know, it's got to be rough. If that doesn't make you desperate, your heart got to be real hard. Well, the other lady said, well, I'm desperate, but I ain't quite that desperate. So when it came time to eat her child, she said, oh no, you must think I'm a fool. I'm not doing it. Well, that mother was out, the other mother was outraged because she gave up her child, and then they came to the king. He said, King was walking up on the wall. The king, you know, one of the leaders who had helped facilitate this mindset and lead them more, but the people had it in them, and that's why they followed, because even when God would raise up prophets that would tell them, turn to God and stop being about your way and give it over to the Lord, they weren't willing to, they weren't desperate enough to follow the Lord because of what it requires. And so they were here out of a hardness and a lack of desperation, because they were simply not desperate enough to trust God. And so they're here, and now God is screaming at them. And the king is upset. And instead of the king repenting, he says, I'm going to kill that prophet that's been telling us that God's going to do it. I'm going to kill that prophet that's been telling us what we need to do so that to avert this, because he's been telling us we need to stop being about our way and give it all to the Lord. And we're not desperate enough to do it. We want our way. Okay. And so God has allowed this to happen to get our attention, so we'll get desperate and stop fighting him. But instead of them yielding, he said, we're going to kill the prophet. Well, the prophet wasn't worried. The prophet said, they said, here come that son of a devil. Now, who it was it was the son of Ahab. Now, you know how Ahab was. And he killed God's prophet. It was a son. And he had them genes and hadn't surrendered to the Lord. And so he was following his father's footsteps. And so he said, when he got there, he said, shut the door hard on him. Then finally he got there. So the people that he sent the messages before him to do the dirty work, so when he got there, the dastardly deed would be done. But the prophet, God told the prophet what was going on, and the prophet said, shut the door hard so they can't get in. And so they held him up. By that time, the king caught up with him. The king, wondering why it hadn't been done, but he's standing at the door. So finally, when the king got there, they opened up the door, and you see the conversation. And I'm going to pick it up now, and here's how it reads. Then Elisha said, hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord, tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, 2 measures of barley for a shekel, in the gate of Samaria. Then a Lord, whose hand the king leaned, answered the man of God and said, behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? And he said, behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not eat thereof. And there were 4 leprous, desperate men at the entering of the gate. And they said one to another, why sit we here until we die? If we say we will enter into the city, then the famine is in the city. And if we die there, and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we die also. See, here's the desperation. Now they're locked in this, and they're reasoning with good minds. They say, you know what? See, these men who were lepers, outcasts. They weren't the holy folk. These were outcasts, the people who looked down on them with contempt and pull their robes of righteousness and say, unclean, don't touch them, we're better than they are. We are that. And see, they weren't, this is why it's hard for those who feel so righteous in their own works to feel desperate. But the lepers, who had nothing within them to make them feel that they were all of that, when these situations came, they were able to look at it from a clear mind. They were able to be brought to the desperation that God requires. Do you not know that it calls for desperate measures to follow God? We're going to get into that. If you're not desperate, you really can't follow God. We're going to look at that. But I'm setting this thing up. So the desperate one said, you know what? If we stay here, we die. If we go in the city, we die. We go, hey, whatever. I'm willing to die taking a chance on life. Did you hear what I said? They had to be made desperate enough to be willing to die. Then they found life. I submit to you that before we can experience true and lasting revival, the first step we must take is a desperate step. A step that says, I have nothing to lose, only to gain. A step that requires faith. For faith is an act of ultimate desperation. going to say that again. Faith is an act of ultimate desperation. Let me just start here before I go any further. The natural, hear me now, the natural state of the human condition is a state of desperation. I said that's the natural state. You know why it's the natural state? Because we're born separated from God, and God is life. That's why when a baby comes into this world, they don't come here in satisfaction, humming the goodness of God, or even cooing. Ooh, coo, coo. You know how babies coo when they're satisfied? They don't come here satisfied. They come here, and in order for them to live, they must do an act of desperation. Because if they don't, they will die, because that is what breathes in life. And so what causes us as humans to survive is the very act of desperation. And if we don't act in desperation, we will surely die. I looked it up in the dictionary, and it says desperation is defined. I have a little, you know, I have my little, what do they call them, smartphones? They're smart because if you don't know something, you can just ask them, and they'll tell you stuff. I have a little dictionary smart enough, and I say, well, I want to know the technical definition. Of course, you know what I'm saying. I want to know the technical definition of desperation. And I called up my little dictionary.com and hit it and then put in the search into desperation and said, now tell me what it means. It said, I'll tell you, dummy. Here's what it means. Having an urgent need or desire. See, well, let's keep on. Having an urgent need or desire, and that's what drive. And because you have it, you're reckless from despair, and therefore you do things that are extreme. The more desperate you are, the more you need and desire something, the more reckless you are about getting it, and you will use extreme and desperate measures in order to attain it. The world plays on this because a coach, do you know what a coach does in sports? He creates a feeling of desperation in the players. Not a feeling of satisfaction, because see, satisfaction is this: to fulfill the desire, needs, and demands, to fulfill the requirements of to convince. Now, so the coach, even if they won the pennant, Mike won it 6 times in a row. But in order for them to do it the second, they say the second time is almost impossible, the third and more impossible yet, 4, 5. So when Mike did it 6 times, they said that's astronomical. But you know why they could do it? Because he stayed hungry. He stayed what? Desperate. Desperate. For the moment you feel that you're okay, I've attained my goal, I want it, you see, then you stop. And if you stop, eventually you're going to die. So the human state is one of desperation. The key is, what are you desperate for? Because you need to be desperate about something. Now the devil understands it, and he puts all the other things, because he knows that we're going to be desperate, because we're born that way. It's in us. We're not born connected to God, and therefore we are desperate until we reconnect. That's what we're desperate for, and that's why Jesus is called the desire of ages. But do you not know something? Your flesh and my flesh, I don't care how many times your flesh or my flesh hears sermons, I don't care how often your flesh and my flesh gets baptized. I don't care how often your flesh and my flesh teaches and intellectualizes a message. It does not trust God. It does not believe that all I need is to be connected to Jesus to be fulfilled. It doesn't believe it. That's why it has to be destroyed. It cannot be redeemed. Do you know God is not going to redeem this flesh? The Bible says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom. You know why? Because the flesh believes that it's God. That's what sin is. You and I are born in sin. That means you, as well as I, inherently and innately believe that you know what's best for you better than God. Because you are God. You have in your nature, like I have in my nature, that you want to control your life. And if you have control, you're going to be all right. And you and I have in our nature that means we even have to control God. So what appeals to us about serving God is not giving our lives over to God. What appeals to us is us having the power over God to get him to do what we want. That's what your flesh is like, and that's what my flesh is like. And it isn't until we become desperate that we are willing to do what God requires. Because in order to follow God, hear what I'm saying to you, and these are God's people that don't know God. They're God's chosen people, but they don't have a clue. And they're on the verge of destruction and don't even realize it. And God is trying his best to get their attention, and they don't know what he's saying. Matter of fact, they're fighting against God in the name of God. I mean, these are God's people. And they think they're right, and that's why they're not desperate. Because desperation requires, in order to follow God, you have to have the ultimate act. I said the ultimate act of desperation. What is the ultimate act of desperation? The ultimate act of desperation is death. That's the ultimate act. When the people in the Twin Towers jumped out the window, desperate, brother. They said, if we stay here, we what? They said, but you know what? If I jump out the window, see, the ultimate act of desperation really results in the ultimate act of faith. You know why they jumped out the window? It's not because they thought it was going to be worse. It's because they believed in their heart, and I believe they were right. That if I stay up in here, without God, it's right. From the flesh value, without God, it makes more sense. That's why you do stupid stuff if you don't know God. I said know God. I didn't say talk about it. But the natural mind says it would be better to jump out this window and die like that than it would to be stay up in here and suffer a death of burning. So they said, I'm going to take a better way. People that commit suicide because that's the ultimate act of desperation. They have lost all hope in this life that they're ever going to get what they want, and they say, I'm going to choose a better way, because to live like this is worse. I'm going to do a better way, and they ultimately do the ultimate act of desperation, which is the ultimate act of faith, because they believe in their hearts more in the death than they do in the life. Well, here's what Jesus says. And he said unto them, all, not some, all. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. Now you know what we've done with that scripture? I'm going to tell you what the natural mind will do with spiritual things. Because the natural mind doesn't believe in God, and it's foolishness to God. When God gives us his word, we will flip it and make it fit the way the natural mind thinks. And so we say, you know what we say what the cross is? We say the cross is something that God requires me to carry. Now, you know what that makes us? That makes us better than God. Because God, who says, I will work to save you, then is a God that puts a burden on us for us to prove how worthy we can be to save ourselves. And the better you bear your cross, the better you're going to get a crown. Now, who's the Savior? I say, yeah, that's it. I'm going to bear my cross. And one day I'm going to get a crown. Well, let's see what the scriptures say about what a cross is. Here's what Jesus says. For whosoever will save his life shall what? See, those who are doing it like that, they're working to save their life because they don't really want to die. Because self says, if I do the next thing, I got to die. I'd rather bear burdens than do that. And you're going to lose your life like that. Jesus says it. Now, folks, I hope God has given us clarity of mind just for a moment, that the human natural mind won't switch this around. It's clear, folk. It's clear. The word is the word, and Jesus is explaining himself about what the cross will do. Now, here's what he says. But whosoever will do what? The same shall what? Now the key is lose his life for what? Why do you lose your life for his sake? Just like the people that jumped off the thing, they believed that it was a better way. That desperation with their situation said, I am willing to lose my life because I believe in losing my life. I'm going to gain really more what I desire because I don't want to die like that. Amen. This is why the Broadway is going to be full of people, even Christians, that said, Lord, Lord, didn't I? That's right. Didn't I? Didn't I? And the Lord said, he didn't say you didn't do it. He said, that's the problem. I never knew you. You did it. But I'm supposed to be doing it. I'm supposed to be crucifying you. What are you doing it? Depart from me. Depart from me. Ye that what? You see, folk, my sermons aren't jumping up sermons. You know why? Because I want to make you desperate. Because it requires desperation to follow Jesus. I don't want to make you comfortable in what you're doing. Because as long as you're comfortable in what you're doing, this story that we're reading is your story. And that's why you hear God's folk complaining all the time when God, well, we'll say with our lips, God is good all the time, but then you listen to him. I mean, your speech betrays you. And we hear ourselves, but still we are so bewitched, I said bewitched, by another power. And we're so comfortable in where we are, we can say the words and do the very act that can bring the thing to fruition. We can say, and then, and think it's all right. We are comfortable, stagnant, right there, and refuse to move. Laodicea in lukewarm water. It ain't cold enough to make us jump out. It ain't hot enough to make us uncomfortable. We are just comfortable. And we don't want preachers to stir up the waters. We don't want preachers. Don't turn up the heat, preacher. Don't make me uncomfortable, because then I'll have to shoot you. I ain't jumping out the pipe. But I'm going to keep turning it up. I'm going to turn it up. because I want you out of it. And Jesus turns up the heat, and that's what he's been doing with these people. He's turning up the heat. But here they are. And here it is. God sent a prophet after he done turned up the heat. Now he got the heat boiling hot. So hot they eating their children. Now he sends a prophet to tell them, Elijah. He said, look at here. You see what's going on here? God told me to tell you. He will turn this situation around in 24 hours. Now, I want to show you what it said. But let me just hit this first. Because the ultimate act of this requires, we're not willing to lose our lives because we're not desperate enough. Because you know why we're not desperate enough? Because we don't have faith to believe that he is. This is what it says. Hebrews 11:6. But without faith, it is what? It is what? To please God. It didn't say you can do it sometimes. Say you can't ever do it without faith. Now, here's what faith is. It defines it. For he that cometh to God must believe what? That who is? It didn't say that what he will supply is, or who he blesses you with is, or what he blesses you with is. It says you must believe that who? He is. Now that goes against our very nature, because our nature says that I am. And I believe in my emotions. And if you tell me, God, that you want me to wait on the one that you're going to pick out for me, I don't believe that. I believe I know better than you, because my emotions are pulling at me and saying, you lonely. And you know why we're lonely? Because we're not desperate enough yet. We're not desperate enough. Let me put it like this. We're not desperate enough for the right thing. And I'm going to use it the way we really can see it. And it's one of my favorite uses. So we go out here and we're desperate, and it should be desperate for God, and we don't believe his word, because his word says, in him and him alone are you made complete. So we say, well, Lord, I want, and we may even pray about it. Give me a man, give me a man. We're already seeking the wrong thing already. The prayer's already wrong. Prayer's already wrong. Now, I know it's natural. I'm not defeating that. It is natural, because we are born separated from God. There's a God-sized hole in all of us, and we've been trusting in this flesh, because all we've ever known when we were born desperate, the first one that met that need that we could physically see was mama, or somebody in the place of mama. It was not God. Now God was blessing. See, God was using all that to bless us already. But he's behind the scenes working in and through people, but it was God. When mama wouldn't do it, he got somebody else to do it. And then he blessed us to be strong enough to accept that. He blessed in spite of the terrible things. God was there blessing all the time. And then he sends a word and says, you know, that was me. And that longing in your heart, only I can do it. But because we are so fixed in this flesh, God knows he has to holler. So he allows the situations that we created, or that sin itself has created, he allows them to come, and he lets the heat turn up. And he says, can you hear me now? Say, no, Lord, I'm still desperate. I just want that no good Negro. So you get it. Or Negro or Negress. So you get it. Then, oh Lord, why did you get beat up, tore up from the floor up, life living here? Oh, can you hear me now? No, give me nothing. He'll get you, or she'll get you, whatever one, beat you to a frazzle. Oh, please love me. Can you hear me? No, I need a nut. Lord have mercy. What you gonna hear? No, don't tell me preacher's God. Tell me it's another person. Even though they've been kicking my butt, I done called holy hell. I don't want to hear nothing else. That's how, whoo. See, I'm telling you, man, because we're desperate for the wrong thing, God can't even get through. And then on the other side, the flip side of that is self-righteousness. Now that's the worst kind of desperation at all. Because you know what self-righteousness says? I'm seeking God. I'm doing the ultimate. And look what I've done. And when Jesus said all that ain't nothing but some dung. They said, we're going to kill him. Get the cross out. Let's powwow. We got to get this man out of here because we're not going to have him reign over us. I mean, this is what the religious people said. These are the mighty leaders of God's church. I said the leaders. Because we love men, we will follow the men rather than God. Even if the men say kill Jesus. And we talking about, I don't worship idols. I keep the commandments. Oh my goodness. And the biggest idol is you. The way you see it. And Jesus allows stuff. You know, we can't have no peace. We look out and we see, look at this happening, look at this happening. How am I supposed to have some peace? Get desperate. That's how. Get desperate enough to do the ultimate act. Because this flesh will never have peace. Do you not know the Bible says, I will keep you in perfect peace if your mind is stayed on me? But who in this church, don't raise your hand, who in this church really believes that? Amen. Amen. The Bible says it. And see, I'm still going in this thing, but at least I accept the fact that I'm desperate. And I accept that the only answer is going to be Jesus. And so I run to him. When I feel my desperation, I know there's time to die. See, but we feel desperation and we work harder. And that creates more desperation, and God got to turn up the heat. And we work hard, and God has to turn up the heat. And then we pray and we say, Lord, why you let this happen? I did this and I've been faithful. And he said, that's the problem. Let me tell you something. If you have more than one problem, you have too many gods. I'm going to say that again. See, I want to say things that will shock you into desperation. If you have more than one problem, you have too many gods. And most of us sitting here will say, I have several problems. I'm telling you, you only have one problem, and that is you don't give it to Jesus. You don't do the ultimate act. You're not taking up your cross because you don't believe that if you lose your life for his sake, you're going to gain it. You don't believe it. And that's your only problem. You solve that problem, and Jesus will work out everything that you face. I don't have anything but one problem. So when my flesh, hear me now, when my flesh rises, and it does, even though I preach this, I realize I have to take it up every day. I say, Lord, I start my day going to the cross, and an act of desperation. I awaken with I need you, Lord. I got to have you today, Lord. I can't step one foot out of here without the knowledge that you are in control of every part of me, that there is nothing in me that I have not given over to you. Therefore, Lord, search me, Lord, and know my heart. Try me and know my ways, and show me if there's any secret thing in me, Lord, because I don't want anything between me and my Savior. I'm desperate for you, Lord. You only seek him like that when you're desperate. But the devil has been satisfying his flesh momentarily with foolishness, and the flesh has been eating it up, and yet it really doesn't lead to peace, but we're so bewitched by this flesh we can't see clearly. So when I have you for a few moments, I'm going to turn the heat up. Now, so here we are with these people. Let me tell you something. There's no way you can follow God in your flesh, because flesh does not believe that God can do what he can do. And even when God will send a message or a messenger to you and tell you what God is doing to get you out of your situation, if you're not doing the ultimate act of desperation, which is really the act that leads to faith, if you're not willing to lose your life because you believe that Jesus is the only one that has life and you're desperate for him, then you can't hear what he's going to do or believe it. You can hear it. That's why so the Lord sent a prophet and told God's people what he's going to do. Now, it was so miraculous, because here's what he said. He said, look, tomorrow about this time shall a measure of fine flour be sold for a shekel, and 2 measures of barley for a shekel in the gates. Now, I got both of them up here. Notice the famine was so great. Look at what it was. Verse 625. It says, there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 that's 80 pieces of silver, and the 4th part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces. That was 80 pieces of 80 shekels. It cost 80 shekels for an ass's head. Now, an ass's head for the Jew is unclean. They would never even touch it, much less pay for it. But God had brought the situation so desperate, he had turned the heat up so, because you see, God is desperate to save us. His desperation caused him to leave glory, come down here and live in hell for 33 years, and then literally go into the bowels of hell and suffer the second death, and then come up with the keys and go to the Father, and he doesn't enjoy heaven after all of that. He sits there interceding for knuckleheads like me and hardheads like you. So until we come to ourselves, he's desperate to save us. And God says, I got to create a desperation. I got to make them as desperate to be saved as desperate as I am to save. So it turned the heat up. And it's so bad that it said, I will pay 80 shekels for a piece of meat that I wouldn't look at or dream about eating in the normal time. And then I will take 5 shekels for a piece of food that is inhuman to eat. A piece of just a little piece of some dove doo-doo. Now, how much more can God turn up the heat? Woo! I'm telling you how hard it is for Jesus to break through. Flesh is and the more we feed it, and I'm telling you, the strongest medicine for the flesh is a feeling that you're right in doing it. Self-righteousness. Hardest nut for God to crack in the world. This story shows it. Story shows it. These are his people. They know all of the facts. But the problem is, Old Covenant says, all that you say, I will do. Jesus told them over and over, you can't do it. But I'm going to let you have that so you can see, because really, I want to write this in your heart. That's Old Testament. So I'll write it in your heart. I'll take that stony heart out of you. I'll write it and put it in your mind. I will be a God to you. I want this thing based on better promises. Not your promise to be faithful to me. My promise that I will be faithful to you if you trust me. busy doing God's work. Busy being God, sitting as God in the temple of God, showing themselves that they are God. God's people. I didn't say the Pope. That's true, but that he's a representative. We like to keep it at the representative so we can be free. Nah, we're going to bring this thing home. No, the only reason why that one man can control so many people because he's speaking your language. You have a dragon in you. That man of sin is me. That man of sin is you. And God is going to reveal it by his truth. And the truth is Jesus saves, not you. And it says all who don't love this truth, he's going to send them strong delusion that you may believe the lie that you love. You're bewitched when you reject it. And these people were rejecting it, and they were bewitched because who in the world, after God sent his messenger to tell you that Jesus is going to deliver you, they can't believe. You know why they can't believe it? Because they don't see any way human possibly that this can happen. Since they are God, they couldn't do that. How in the world can God do it? How do we limit God? Do you believe his promises? Do you live and rest in his promises? Or do you rationalize them away with the 6 mindset? 6 can't perceive 7. God is holy. Holy other. Your works and my works can't reach it because it's not holy. Sabbath truth teaches us that. That's why I said don't you do any work, because your work ain't holy. If you want to have holy works, you have to stop working so only God can work. You have to do the ultimate act of desperation because you have the ultimate faith in God. If you don't believe that he is, you will not sacrifice your life. You will not lose your life for his sake. You won't do it. Even if the messenger of God will come and tell you that God will turn your situation around if you just trust him. Because you see, this was unbelievable. How is God going to turn this around in 24 hours? He's going to make it so that what we are selling that's worthless for 80 shekels, he's going to get the finest of food and sell it for 1 shekel. In a 24-hour period. No man can do that. You're going to tell me God's going to do it? You lying. I'm not going to step out there and try to get it. I'm going to stay right here until I die. Well, the folk desperate, you know, the lepers now, see, the lepers don't have anything to look about in themselves and make them think that they all of that. See, the lepers, do you know what gives people hope to stay in sin? Confidence in their own flesh. Yes. Well, Paul said it in Philippians 3. He says, I have no more confidence in the flesh. But self-righteousness teaches you to have all kind of confidence in your obedience. Paul, read it in Philippians 3. He says, I have no more confidence in the flesh. I only have confidence in God. Therefore, I count everything else to desperate. I count everything else done that I might win Christ. I just want to know him, and I'm seeking him with all my heart. I don't want my righteousness, which is of the law. I want the righteousness that comes from him, because I realize that my life ain't enough, and therefore I'm being made conformable unto his death, that I might experience the power of his resurrection, his life in me. And that's what I see. I forget everything. I forget the victories of yesterday. I'm desperate. Even though I got victory yesterday, I realize that I want more of Jesus. It creates a greater hunger, a greater desire to be more like Jesus. So I forget it all, and I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God I just want him. That's desperate. That's desperate. He said everything else is done. Now can you just be honest with yourself? Have a moment of clarity. I'm not asking you to go to Jesus like that, but I'm asking you just to honestly, can you say you count everything to dung so you can win Christ? Tell the truth. Because if you hold on to that lie, you're setting yourself up to be lost. See, I'm just like you. I'm not throwing stones, but I am cutting up the heat. You know why I'm cutting it up? Because I'm like you. I know you well. My flesh just like yours. And I've been there, done that. But after I got some heat, at certain levels, I didn't hear it at first. I walked in that foolishness for years. 25, 24. But for some of us, we've been going longer than that. But, I shouldn't have been that long, really. But it took that for this flesh. But you know why, though? See, that's why the Lord says, I would rather that you be hot or cold. See, when you're hot, you're already walking with Jesus because you know it. You're desperate. But when you're cold, you think, see, a sinner says, ain't nothing wrong with me. I can live my life, do what I want. If it feels good, do it. I can do that. And it's okay. Because I am God. I'm going to live large and in charge. And so he can be reached because you know what? The Lord, when he shows him in his trial that I don't care how much money you have, I don't care how much power you think you have, and that's why you got this world like it is today. See, this world is desperate, and it's ready for the gospel. It's primed for us to do our work. But we are so caught up in the world, we are scratching our heads and hearts feeling for fear just like they are. Because we're seeking after the same things. I'm taking my time this morning because I don't have your mind long. Because as soon as you leave out here, you're back into that world that teaches you that this is all a lie. And your flesh says, yeah, because I feel this. I feel that. Well, that right there should tell you something wrong with it. If it fits you naturally, if you believe in the Word of God at all, don't you know that our natural sin our natural state is sinful? So our natural feelings are sinful. And we long after the stuff that's no good for us. I like sweets, but sweets kill me. I like smoking cigarettes. I even like the taste of Tanqueray gin and lime. I got to the place where I like heroin. But it was killing me. Now some of us think because we don't do that, but we like to we like the feeling that we are righteous. That's a drug. That's a drug. That's the worst kind of drug. Because you know what? When I'm cold, the Lord can show me that heroin is sin. I can see that clearly. I can't dress that up. I'm cold and I say, yeah, Lord, I agree. This thing is killing me. But if my drug is righteousness, I'm saying, ain't nothing wrong. I need more of it. I need more of it. And if somebody tells you that it's sin, you're ready to stone them. Just like they did Jesus. And you can read it in the Bible, see that the people did it, and still do it. Why? Because the natural mind is nothing but a playground for Satan. Satan can trick us, fool us, make us do monkey flips, and think we're serving God. And when you realize that, you get desperate because you realize, I cannot trust myself, Lord. I can't get it without you. I need you, Lord. I got to have you because if I ever take one moment of any day to myself, I am setting myself up for the devil to manipulate me and make a fool out of me. And I've been a fool too long. All right, well, I'm taking too long on all of this here. See, I'm going to say this. Here's what he responded to. Then the Lord, on whose hand the king leaned, answered the man of God and said, behold, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, might this thing be? He said, behold, thou shalt see it with thine eyes, but shalt not eat thereof. I was going to take this to the promise that the Lord has said, well, I'm going to do it. He says, return to me. He says, wherein? But I just want to show you. Here's the promise. The Lord says, bring ye all the tithes. He said, you've robbed me. You've turned away from me. You're cursed with a curse. And people say, well, how have we robbed you? See, the Lord says, you've turned away from me, but they couldn't see it. He said, well, I'm going to hit you where you really live. He said, the way you deal with your finances. He said, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, and that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord, that I will open up the windows of heaven. Remember the man said, if God should open up the windows of heaven, how could he do this? And many of us, just as we go into the appeal now. Now this is something, see, that's why I love this church. I return tithe and offering too. Matter of fact, I do it more often than I do tithe, because that's where God has taken me. Offering is based on how much you believe God is doing what he promised to do in the tithe. And the more you believe it, you go past the tithe. But you don't even see it. But here's the key. Let me just say it like this. See, many of us, 2/3 of God's people are robbing God on the books. So that's people that's reported. That's the ones that, now it's a greater number than that. The majority of God's people really don't trust God. We're just like the children back then. And I can tell you that you may have moments of peace, but because you live in this world and as God allows the heat to turn up, you're going to suffer just like everybody else. Now God in mercy has been holding back the winds, but he can't do it forever. He says, eventually I got to let them blow, because there's some people like Caleb and Joshua that are ready to go, and I can't be fair to them, causing them to keep on wondering, waiting for y'all to get it together. But then there's some sitting up here saying, well, I return tithe and offering. But just like he told a man, you may do it, you may even be seeing it, but you're not going to benefit from it. So many of us are returning tithe, and I hear statements like this, even from them. Pastor, just a few of us are carrying the burden. What is it doing? What is a burden? I thought the promise is, I will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out of what? That there will not be what? Can the redeemed say so? How many are redeemed is the question. Even those that return, they say, you're going to see it, but because you really don't believe God, because you really haven't been desperate enough to surrender all, that tithe is a lie, because it says you've given God all and you still haven't. You are still God, and because you are God, you can't trust what he will do, and when God brings the heat up and the ultimate test is going to be there, you will fail. I want to create desperation in here today so we can have good news. Because if we get desperate enough to jump, we're going to find that Jesus will be there to catch us. So my question to you is, are you desperate enough to take the leap? The building's on fire. And if you stay here, you will surely die. But Jesus is standing on the outside, and he says, come unto me, jump. For I am that I am. I have life, and I have it more abundantly. In me dwells all the fullness of the Godhead, Gregory. And everything you're looking for, everything you're desperate for, everything you're seeking with all the strength that is within you, you're not going to find it outside of me. You got to let it go. You got to be willing to die to that kind of life. That flesh, you got to be willing to let it go, because that flesh will keep you in that madness. Bring it to me, Gregory, so I can destroy it. Are you desperate enough today? Yeah. Or do you still trust your sinful flesh? Is the heat hot enough for you yet? Or does God have to turn it up to another level? Because I'm telling you, folks, more heat is coming worldwide. And if you don't learn how to trust him now, if you don't learn how to walk in Sabbath and not trust in your works and trust only in his, and take the leap every day, do the ultimate act of desperation, which is the ultimate act of faith, because you believe that in him dwells it. Therefore, you're willing to lose your life for his sake. Not just jump out the window to die in your way, but because Jesus has life, it is even better. It's a better decision that is made by those who take the leap, because this one is based on truth. And this one leads to life. You can play. And so my appeal to you, I know we like flesh, we like to see folk come forward, because that makes us feel better about our church. And I do that from time to time, but you know what? When God tells me to make it like this, that's what I do. Because you know why? Because God, this decision is to be made by people that have been good church members for years. And we like to think, because pride is a part of our desperation. It is the main part. We like to feel that we're all right and in need of nothing. We're rich and increased with goods. That's what we like to feel. That's our natural state. You know? Even though we're desperate, we like to mask that desperation with false righteousness and feel we're okay, and satisfaction is death. Satisfaction, self-satisfaction is death, because it's a lie. So I'm not going to try to embarrass anybody here today, because it would make it too big of a gulf to cross, because the gulf already is hard enough. And I think maybe sometimes we don't like these kind of appeals. We like public appeals because it keeps the pressure off of us looking at our own selves. Oh, Pastor, it's good to see somebody that's found the Lord. My question is, have you found him? I don't want to put you all on Front Street. I preach generally, and I'm hitting a whole lot of folk. And I know you're feeling, he's preaching to me, and I am. But it isn't because I'm looking at you or thinking about you. It's because I'm preaching the truth about human situation and about God's people, and most of us fit it. That's why Jesus has not come yet. That's why he's been holding back the winds. Because the majority of us are not saved. Yes, I said it. Because the majority of us have been duped by our own self-righteousness and made comfortable and satisfied by believing that we keep the requirements required. And that has led us to lukewarmness, and Jesus tells us our problem. So, I'm not making this is an appeal for everybody sitting in here. If you've made that choice, you're not mad with this appeal, you're glad to see it being done this way. Because if you really are, and that doesn't mean you realize you are all that, because the right kind of desperation says, like Paul, I do not count myself to have apprehended. That's why I seek after every day. But when you see your brothers and sisters get this truth, you get happy. You want everybody to experience the joy. You don't feel like the elder brother about the way he felt about his prodigal brother. You get happy. Because there's enough joy to go around. There's enough blessings that everybody can feel like there's no more room. I'm so happy with Jesus that if he didn't do anything else, I'm all right. And because I'm so happy in Jesus, he can come today. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. Oh, that doesn't mean that you're going to stop seeking. Because even when we get in glory, we are going to be desperate to have more of God in us. And we're going to be seeking him throughout the ceaseless ages of eternity. Are you ready to cross over today? Are you ready to take the first step in revival and reformation? The only way this church is going to get on fire is we take the first step. See, the children of Israel did a whole lot of reforming. When God would send one messenger and they would reform for a minute, but because they really hadn't become desperate enough and done the ultimate act of desperation, which is the ultimate act of faith. Because they really didn't die for Christ's sake, they would go right back into sin. Right back into sin. And revival didn't last because it wasn't based on the truth. And that's what we've been doing over and over and over. But lasting revival, the kind of revival that will usher in the coming of the Lord, because we will be sealed and fixed, is a kind that goes the way of desperation and will lose their lives continually for Christ's sake. And he will keep us on fire. All ye that labor and are heavy laden, come to Jesus right now. Not physically. You will show it physically by the way you act later. Right here in the quietness, in the secret place between you and God, when nobody's looking but you and God and the angels and the devil and his angels and the unfallen world. You got a group that's looking now. Well, I have to back off that because they can't read your mind, but they will see it in the way you act. Make your calling and election sure today, because this is for Bethel. We need revival and reformation. For the steps we're going to take, we need Jesus. Bless us to this end, Lord, because in order for us to do what you're requiring us, we have to be desperate. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Options are few.